Okay, we are live. This is New Atlas Live. I'm Brian Berletic. Joining me is my friend and colleague, Angelo Giuliano. For people who do not know who Angelo is, for about 10 years, I used to just write anonymously, and it was Angelo and some people that he cooperated with just doing alternative media on back when it used to be Twitter. They convinced me to start doing videos, and they all helped me get going. So I'm very grateful to Angelo, and everyone has Angelo to thank for me doing videos. Hello, Angelo. It's been a long time since we've done a live stream. How have you been doing?
Doing great. Here in China, everything is fine. Actually, last time we had a live stream, remember, it was October 8th. I think it was just one day after this the invasion, Hamas invasion into the occupied territories. We had this, usually we don't do those, hot thing. Usually it's better just to have a cold approach, take a step back, because it's hard to have a full picture. So now after 1 year, a lot of things we can really see exactly what happened. The big question is, was it worth? Now we can see the whole damage, what this action of Hamas, what they did. And so the massacres were happening in Gaza. Basically, there's a genocide happening. There's a land grabbing. Gaza is getting smaller. The long-term plan for Gaza is probably just to get people from Gaza just slowly, if they can get them into other countries, or to their neighbors, to Egypt. So and besides that, we can see now this project of Greater Israel expanding. They're taking more land in Golan, and we see Syria. Part of the axis of resistance is gone. It might not be a livable state anymore. The Syria we knew might be partition. There's probably going to be a balkanization, and maybe a long time of instability and wars. Maybe warlords, pretty much similar to what happened in Libya. So what the U.S. empire does is that when they cannot get a shift of power, a U.S. puppet, what they do is they go for full destruction. And now here we can see what happened. So there are lots of implications for the axis of resistance. There are implications, smaller implication, I would say, for the multipolar world that we can touch upon. But I think there's a huge implication for the Palestinian cause, because now Syria gone, there's a high probability that Israel will be able to strike directly to Iran, because now they can fly over Syria. They can fly over Iraq, because Iraqi airspace is controlled by the US. That means it's going to be easier for Israel to strike Iran. And then, I don't know, the escalation there could be dramatic. What is your take? What do you think? How do you see Syria in the next few months, Brian?
Well, I think let's just go back to October 7th last year, and we had a very unpopular conclusion that we were drawing from it, that this was a deliberate pretext for Israel to, first of all, flatten Gaza, which they have now done. And then it was a pretext for them to then expand conflicts militarily across the region, and to eventually create a permissive environment for region-wide conflict, drawing in Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, drawing in Syria, attacking Syria, and also beginning a confrontation with Iran, which is exactly what they then went ahead and did over the last year. Since all of this has happened, that is exactly what has happened. And I remember warning people about Hamas. Hamas is basically one branch from the same tree of these militant groups created and used by the US and its Arab and Turkish partners in the region to invade and take over Syria. These ultimately from the Muslim Brotherhood, which branched out to Al-Qaeda, ISIS. HTS is just a rebranding of all of these groups, and they are literally still listed as terrorists by the collective West, but also Russia, Iran, everyone. This is the one thing they all agree on, is that these are absolutely terrorists. And I pointed out that at one point from 2011 onward, Hamas sided with the US-backed and Israeli-backed terrorists trying to overrun Syria, and they fought alongside them for a certain period of time. So we warned people about all of this, and I'm not, we're not trying to pass judgment on people. We understand that people become emotional. They see what is happening in Gaza, and you can't help but be affected by it emotionally. It makes you angry, makes you want justice, makes you want revenge. But many times the US, Israel, its other proxies, they do things like this deliberately to elicit an emotional response, to override your reason, your logic, your ability to strategize, your ability to see things clearly and make decisions. They do it on purpose. They did it on purpose to create upward pressure across the region to force Hezbollah, Ansar Allah, Iran itself to do something about it, to draw them in. It was a big, rusty bear trap laid out in the middle of the floor. They didn't even try to camouflage it. And people were jumping into it head first because they were overwhelmed by emotions. And again, you cannot blame people for that. But that is where we are now, and we warned that it would be to draw in and overextend Hezbollah, Syria, Iran, and the ultimate goal has always been, and I hate to keep bringing this up, Angela, I'm sure you're tired of seeing this 2009 Brookings Institution paper titled "Which Path to Persia," and it's all in here. And let's just go look at the table of contents real quick. As I really think at this juncture, it is extremely important to understand this and to understand how, because a lot of people are talking about Trump coming in, he's going to change everything. He's not going to change anything. He played a role in implementing everything you see on this table of contents, as did Obama before him, as did Biden after him. And so they have the diplomatic solution, and they admit in this paper that they were going to make a deal with Iran. The U.S. would sabotage it, blame it on Iran, and then use that as a pretext to basically lead into what was ultimately Trump's maximum pressure sanctions. We all remember that is in this paper. So it was Obama pretended to do the deal with them and deliberately sabotage it. Trump unilaterally left it and then applied maximum pressure. So where are we now? Now we are in disarming Tehran, the military options. So they're talking about a U.S. invasion, basically a 2003 Iraq-style invasion. I don't know how viable that is. But they also talk about the al-Sarak option, which was when Israel struck at Iraq's nuclear program and destroyed it. And so they're talking about either the U.S. doing this, Israel doing it, or having Israel go ahead and do it, pretend they did it on their own, and then when Iran retaliates, or they'll just pretend Iran retaliated, the U.S. will use that as a justification to then wade into the conflict. It is all in this paper. As a matter of fact, I'm going to drop the link to this in the comments so people can save it and read it, because it is literally the playbook that they are using. They also have all of these other options, and it's not like they're doing one at a time. They're doing all of them at the same time. Toppling Tehran, regime change, the Velvet Revolution. So this is the NED-funded color revolution. Inspiring an insurgency, supporting Iranian minority and opposition groups, literal terrorists, listed terrorist organizations. They even talk about the MEK, how they're listed by the US as terrorists. And if they want to support them openly, which is an admission that they're already covertly supporting them, they have to take them off the terror list, which is what happened under the Trump administration. And then they talk about a coup. And if you think about it, Angelo, every single one of these options were used against Syria, ultimately toppling and erasing Syria. All of these options were used in one way or another on Libya. And this is, at least the regime change options were used on Ukraine in 2014 onward, and in Georgia from 2003 to 2008. And now there's trouble in Georgia again. So that's a lot to digest. Angela, is there anything you want to throw in here? I think we should talk. Yeah.
Yeah, we should talk also about the Rand Corporation paper extending Russia, because here we are right in the middle. Extending Russia, here there were a few points. One was actually using Ukraine, so we are in the middle of it. They are talking about creating a new front, which would have been Georgia, and also extending Russia in Syria, hoping that actually the, Russia would invest more into Syria with the rebels, and it would be a distraction. And overextending, meaning you potentially could destabilize Putin's power. And so here, this is what we saw. And I would say that we come to actually we can come also to the analysis of why Russia didn't actually insist on helping the regime or the government of Assad, is because they didn't want to fall into the trap. You see, there's a we call this the sunk cost fallacy. The sunk cost is when you have lost, you have spent already, let's say, $10, and you say, well, because I spent already $10, what it doesn't matter. I can spend another $1, and then $100 later, with having always the same thinking, you say, well, I spend $100. Why don't I spend another $10? And this is how a whole countries can go bankrupt. And so there was a trap. It was a trap that actually, you see the trap very similar to the USSR. The USSR got into the trap of Afghanistan, and it was exactly the same. The Mujahideen were funded by the US, and it was a trap. And Russia, the USSR didn't have the means. In addition to that, there was actually they pushed the prices of oil down because of they started pumping lots of oil, especially from Saudi Arabia. So the revenues of the USSR was going down, and they could not finance this war in Afghanistan. So you see, in Syria, Russia didn't have much choice. It had to look for its own interest. And also there was Syria was not the Syria of 10 years earlier, and maybe Assad just dropped it. I think he did drop it, and was probably the wisest thing to do. And I would say this didn't happen in vacuum. I think it was a concerted somehow. Putin was probably not very happy, but it was concerted. He had, I think, Turkey. They all talked to each other, because they ultimately, I think, they managed one thing, which is, I would say, somehow positive, is that it didn't turn into a bloodshed. Even though probably there are some crimes here and there, but it was not the bloodshed that could have happened if actually Russia was actually standing firm. It could have been dramatic, like killings of population, civilian population. So somehow it is a minor evil what happened, and Russia is probably the best thing that it could do. And I would say Russia has things to salvage that we can touch upon. Is a Tartus naval base, which is extremely strategic for Russia. So can it leave some military assets that are extremely strategic for Russia? Yes or no? I don't know. This is a big question mark. What do you think?
I don't think they're going to keep their bases. And the Western media is already reporting that there's evidence of Russia withdrawing. And I mean, maybe they could be lying about that, but what would they gain by lying about that? Would Russia say, well, the Western media said we're packing up, maybe we should just pack up? But these are good points that you're making, Angela. I want to go over the collapse of Syria. It happened very quickly. I did do a video about it. I've been posting a lot of information on X and Telegram as well. And basically what happened was there was this huge military buildup. This offensive launched out of Turkish occupied territory, and then eventually US occupied territory, and Jordan, where the US military has been building an army of terrorists there along Syria's southern border. This was all launched at one time. It was a massive operation. It took a year or more to organize. And so surely Russian, Iranian, Syrian intelligence knew about this. And by October, they already began heavy bombing in the Idlib area, trying to disrupt this. So I I believe this is what happened. There's no way to know for sure at this moment until more information comes out. But I believe they knew months ahead of time that this offensive was coming. And they came up with two contingencies. The first contingency was, we will try to disrupt it and stop it. If we can break the momentum of it, stabilize it, and then we can buy more time and think of what to do next. The second contingency is, if we cannot stop it, just what you said, Angela, there's no point in over-investing in this and falling into into Washington's trap, which is to deliberately overextend both Russia and Iran in Syria. And so that is basically what we saw happen. Now, let me see if I can find this video. This was a great video on my YouTube channel under community. I share my own articles and some different things that I'm doing, but I also share a lot of other videos. And this was History Legends, Alex from History Legends, The Complete Collapse of the Syrian Army Explained. And in that video, he shows all of the evidence regarding the fighting that took place at the beginning of the offensive. People are saying someone betrayed, there was betrayal, they didn't fight, they just ran away. That's not true. They did. They stood and they fought hard, and they were decisively defeated because Syria was hollowed out. I have played a number of times that clip, Angela, do you remember, from 2019, Dana Stroll of the U.S. Department of Defense at a CSIS talk, where she's talking about how the U.S. is occupying a third of Syrian territory where all the wheat and oil is, and they're doing it deliberately because their proxy war turned Syria into a pile of rubble, and she wanted to keep it a pile of rubble. So basically what happened is they hollowed out Syria. The Syrian army was just wasting away. Russia and Iran are overextended elsewhere. They are involved in conflicts elsewhere. Russia in Ukraine is heavily invested. That is their top priority. They do not have the ability to build up the Syrian army for them, and Syria didn't have the ability to do it themselves because they have no economy. And so what happened was, you had a Syrian army there with defenses prepared, but they were prepared to fight a force from 2011 to 2019, not a force here in 2024 with intelligence, reconnaissance, surveillance drones, attack drones. And that is what happened. These terrorists were not just just a horde. They were a trained army. They were prepared for over a year by Turkey, by the US. And they came in, they just outmaneuvered, outscoped their positions. There was nothing they could do to fight back. And they would fall back to a further back position, and it would all start all over again. So eventually they just dissolved it. It just said, there's no point fighting. If they stood there and fought, they would have died for nothing, because they would not have really slowed this down. They would not have stopped it. They just would have died, and all of their equipment would have fallen into their hands. So there's reports that thousands of Syrian soldiers moved over into Iraq with their equipment. Israel just bombing anything that was left. And this goes back to your point, Angelo, about, let's just look at the map. There's Israel right there in that light blue. This is Syria, this is Iraq, and this is Iran. And what Israel had done in their previous missile strikes on Iran was fly over Jordan, across Iraq, which is still occupied by the US, and then conduct standoff strikes on targets in Iran. Now they don't have to fly through Jordan. The last time they did this, they lied and said they went through Syrian territory, but they didn't. They couldn't because of Syria's air defenses. But now those air defenses are completely gone. So they can get very close to Iran through Syria and just pass through a little bit of Iraqi airspace to carry out these standoff attacks. So I hear a lot of people talking about, oh, Turkey did this for this reason, Israel is doing this for this reason. This was always part of this step-by-step process of first isolating Iran and then destroying Iran, so that the path has been cleared. And now it is Iran. Iran is the next target. And Angela, maybe we can transition into this. Well, first we have this Wall Street Journal article. Trump team weighs options, including airstrikes, to stop Iran's nuclear program. We also have this. IDF sees chance for strikes on Iran nuke sites after knocking out Syria air defenses. This is literally almost verbatim everything that you see in those articles is verbatim taken out of this 2009 Brookings paper. And the last thing I will say before I hand it over to you, Angelo, is that who has Trump surrounded himself with? War hawks, wall-to-wall war hawks, with the exception of maybe one or two people who are not capable of stopping any sort of war that is coming. They're really just there to buy support from the American people. And these people have openly and repeatedly throughout their political career talked about war with Iran, war with China. And so now the stage has been set under the Biden administration almost perfectly to usher in this Trump administration that is just chomping at the bit to do its part to continue all of this. Am I mistaken, Angelo?
No, absolutely. I would say maybe the changes are going to be probably a slightly a bigger shift towards China. I think probably they are going to come to their senses when it comes to Ukraine, and they'll everybody will have to save face. But somehow I see a big shift towards China, and I would say many things are happening in this region of the world. We are talking about the trilateral alliance. So you have South Korea, Japan, and the US. You have AUKUS that was created much earlier, Australia, UK, and the US. And we see things are moving. We see something that happened that is actually extremely big was this false flag operation that they tried to do in South Korea that led to that was supposed to be combined with the martial law. And that is extremely big, because should South Korea start to have a even small confrontation with North Korea, South Korean army and legally would fall under U.S. command. So U.S. command would have potentially an army. If you look at the reserve, all combined, we are talking about probably 2 or 3 million soldiers. And you have the games of the alliances. Once you have South Korea at war, maybe Japan would actually join, even though Japan is an old enemy of South Korea. But the U.S., even with this president, or U.S. puppet president, is South Korean, Yoon, they managed actually to form this alliance. And so we see the legally they're actually starting to change laws in the region. Japan, which is supposed to have a Pacific constitution, that was actually written by the US. So much for sovereignty. The US actually wrote the constitution, but it's supposed to be Pacific. What they did recently was to do a reinterpretation of that constitution, meaning that Japan could come at the rescue of an ally. And guess who are the allies in the region? There's an alliance between Taiwan and Japan. So in reality, de facto, if Taiwan was to be invaded, what Japan should, according to this new interpretation of the constitution, should come at the help of Japan, of Taiwan. And you see, and some people are starting to be very nervous, even in Taiwan, because they realize that the DPP of Taiwan, the pro-democracy party, they actually they did a tweet praising the martial law in South Korea. And you see, the DPP came to power because the last 20 years they were demonizing the Kuomintang that was ruling Taiwan under martial law. Now there's martial law in South Korea, and they say, "Oh, this is a good way to protect democracy. We should have a martial." It's right what they did, martial law by protecting democracy. I mean, that's absurd, right? So the Kuomintang, they realized that this could be possible in Taiwan. So now they're moving things. They want to have a new law to be enacted, to be voted, that right now the president can issue a martial law right away, and for 30 days it has to be accepted by the legislative yuan. Now in 30 days you can do huge damage, right? What they want to do is to bring this down to 24 hours, extendable to 56 hours. And you see, they are starting to realize this is a possibility, and especially a place like Taiwan. Taiwan was under martial law until 1987, pretty much similar to South Korea. So there is a possibility they are going to use legal means to to do coup in the region, and it becomes irreversible. Once you have martial law and you are at war, you're in a situation like in Ukraine. In Ukraine, the opposition is in jail because it's all executive orders. The media, all the pro-Russia, or I would say balanced media, they shut them down. That's what you can do under martial law. And that's what South Korean presidents tried to do. So you see, when you look at everything that is happening in Southeast Asia, including the US pushing the Philippines to antagonize China over maritime border disputes, you can see they are actually you put all those pieces together and you realize, well, we are extremely close to a confrontation. And with the game of those alliances would be the same as World War I, where you have a small confrontation and everybody joins the other side, and the escalation would escalate to World War III, because I don't see Russia standing by. I don't see North Korea would join China. And that's it. That's World War III.
What's interesting is that what is going on in the Asia-Pacific region is very similar to what the U.S. has already done in Europe vis-a-vis Russia. And so I think it's important, because we haven't talked about this in a long time, Angelo, to talk about the actual status of Taiwan. Taiwan is recognized under international law as China, as part of China, is an island province of China. Even the administration in Taiwan, in their constitution, they call themselves the Republic of China, and in the constitution, Taiwan is considered a province of all of China. The government in Taipei claims to be the sole legitimate government of all of China, which we could all agree is absurd. The whole world agrees that that is absurd. Even the US officially agrees that that is absurd, that there is only one government of China, and that is the People's Republic of China in Beijing. So it's very important to point that out. And then the double game the US is playing by pretending that Taiwan is still somehow a country anyway. Angela, I know when you said if Taiwan is invaded, and you mean China.
I mean,
but
actually, it cannot be invaded because it's
yes,
China. Chinese
it's China, and like
just because we need to better explain. Absolutely.
No, we're just going over this because there's still so many people that don't understand this. So when we talk about it, we understand. We're using the language that the Western media uses just to relate with it. So no, I mean, and with China flying planes into the air defense identification zone of Taiwan, I mean, these are Chinese warplanes flying in Chinese airspace, like literally Chinese airspace, not even the air defense identification zone, is their airspace. So all of this is a product of the West's control over information space, and because of that, their control over the narrative, which is a very powerful weapon. We're talking about the Orezhnik, the Russian Orezhnik intermediate range ballistic missile, as a super weapon, as a game changer. A lot of the hold on a second, I want to star these questions that people are asking so we can get to them at the end. If you have a question, just type in Q or the word question, and then type your question, and we'll try to get to all of them at the end. But America has the ultimate super weapon. It's control over global information space. And we're kind of jumping around a little bit, but I did definitely want to touch on this because we started by talking about Syria. Angelo, I'm sure you've seen these depressing, disgusting videos of Al-Qaeda being Al-Qaeda, just executing people in the streets for being the wrong religion, the wrong political persuasion, the wrong ethnicity. And this is the Western media's response to this. So at one time, they are talking about some prison that the West has been lying about for years in Syria. It's the Syria's slaughterhouse, and all of this torture is going on there. The prison is now open. Journalists are walking around in there. There's no evidence of any of this. And when you read this New York Times article, they're still referring to the fake NGOs that the US government itself funds to lie about these things, because there's no evidence now that the prison is open to actually refer to. There's no pictures or video of any of the claims that they're making in there. And then the terrorists are proudly videotaping themselves mass murdering people in the streets, And this footage is out there all over social media, and the Western media is pretending like it's not happening, or they're spinning it. So they say, Syria, video shows summary execution of Assad regime henchmen. And this whole headline, they don't know who these people are. There's no way to confirm who these people are. They're obviously just two unlucky people in a field that were speaking the wrong dialect and were executed point blank in this field. And the Western media writes a headline like this to justify it. So when the public reads that, they'll say, well, they're Assad henchmen. Who cares? And they all did it. So that's Le Monde in France. This is the BBC doing the exact same thing. And Al Jazeera, Qatari state media, by the way, if people didn't know, it is Qatari state media, and they do the exact same thing. And again, we're doing a lot of jumping around. Al Jazeera, every there's like a cycle that they go through. Israel brutalizes Gaza. Al Jazeera and the fake human rights industrial complex in the West pump up their credibility by covering it and pretending to be anti-Israel and anti-US. And then it goes from that to another attempt to do regime change in Iran or Syria. And people are all following Al Jazeera, all following Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, because they were just following their coverage of Gaza. And now they're following their coverage of this US-backed regime change operation, and they believe it. There's so many people that think Al Jazeera is a credible news organization when it is, in fact, just basically Qatari BBC. So all of this combines into this information warfare that is taking place and America's dominance over information space worldwide. So now let's go back to Asia Pacific and
can
Taiwan.
I just one thing?
Sure,
it's interesting because it's really important for people to understand this game of those fake NGOs. You mentioned Human Rights Watch, you mentioned Amnesty International, you have Al Jazeera when it comes to media, and you have also, but they do it on purpose. It's in addition to that, you have George Soros Foundation that funds also those pro-Palestinians movement. So you have those those protests, pro-Palestinians. They come up with the LGBT flags. Some are green. You have Greta Thunberg. So basically, what happens is that by pouring those, let's say, LGBT leftist, those ideology into the pro-Palestinians, you have all the conservatives that might actually side with the pro-Palestinian cause, but they reject completely that. And actually, they might end up being pro-Palestinians because how much they despise that. And this is the whole strategy, because ultimately, when you look at George Soros, he's funding both sides. He's funding the pro-Palestinians and the Zionists as well.
Absolutely. It's Empire 101, divide and conquer. Yeah. They look for fault lines, and if there are no fault lines, they create them, and then they work to expand them. They get everybody fighting with each other so that no one notices that they have a collective enemy that they should join together and go fight. And it works like a charm every single time, because people more times than not are going to put their emotions and their ideology above, first and foremost, all other things, including being logical, rational, doing objective research, doing proper, complete analysis, and developing a sound strategy. That is just, unfortunately, that's something that does not come natural to people. Their emotions come natural, and the collective West fully exploits that. Now, I think we do have to get back to Asia Pacific, because this is ultimately where all of this leads. People are very upset about the collapse of Syria. And I believe that the collapse of Syria does have serious implications for the multipolar world, because what the United States is doing, they have all of these countries that are pivoting away from them. What they're doing is they're undermining them. They're trying to overextend Russia, Iran, and China, and they're targeting nations all along their periphery. Nations like the Baltic states, they've politically captured those, the regime change in Ukraine, what they're doing in Georgia right now, Armenia, Azerbaijan, the Caucasus region, and also here in Southeast Asia. The US is trying to politically capture all the nations here. They're successfully destabilizing Myanmar, which is Thailand's neighbor to the west. And they more or less have politically captured the Philippines. And they are transforming the Philippines into basically the Southeast Asia Ukraine. they will use as a battering ram against China. And again, how are they able to do this? Because they infiltrate a nation's information space. They infiltrate the education system, the political system. They create an opposition. They build up alternative parallel institutions. And then when critical mass is reached, they undermine, topple the existing order, and they replace it with this one that they've been building up for years and years. And I just want to share with you this this diagram that I made just to see if it makes sense to people. And it's basically one single spectrum the US works along toward politically capturing a targeted nation. So some countries, like say here in Thailand, there are people in leadership positions who see the US NED and they think it's just misguided activism by the US. The US just wants to promote democracy and human rights, and they're just culturally out of touch, and they don't understand that it's disruptive here in Thailand. But in reality, that is not true. The NED is one of the first steps toward politically capturing a country. If the NED is in your country operating, it's because the US wants to politically capture it. And if you look at the spectrum, it starts with the NED funding media organizations, education programs. Then it gets into political parties. The political parties start to organize protests when governments notice that a US-backed opposition is in the streets and begin cracking down. That gives the US the ability to impose sanctions. The US then begins propaganda like they're doing toward Myanmar right now, like they had been doing to Syria for years and years, vilifying it and creating a justification for further intervention. Before you know it, you have armed groups the US is backing either covertly or openly, a US-backed proxy war like we saw in Libya and Syria, and then outright US intervention, invasion, or occupation. But at any point along this spectrum, if the US is able to topple a government, they will. They don't need to go through all of these steps. And we can see examples like that in recent history of countries that fell long before the US had to militarily intervene. Ukraine, for example, in 2014, that is a good example. And so it's very important that people understand this, because ultimately we're talking about all of these things, and we didn't even talk about Ukraine yet, Angelo. We have to get back to Ukraine. We're talking about what a disaster the Middle East has become. We're talking about people who they don't get it. They don't understand what is going on. They're supporting groups that are actually controlled by the US, used by the US, and it all comes down to information space. And I think Russia, China, they understand this. They have their own, obviously they understand this because they've closed off their information space from the US. And they have their own media platforms that they're using to control the flow of information inside their information space. They also have international media organizations that try to reach out to the rest of the world. But I don't think that it's enough to compete with what the US has. The US with Facebook, now called Meta, Instagram, X even. We're happy that X is no longer Twitter, but when you really think about it, X is still literally entwined with the US government. Elon Musk, who bought X, is now is officially entering into the US government inside the cabinet of President-elect Donald Trump. So think about that. Very troubling. And the multipolar world does not have an alternative for X or YouTube or Meta. They have their own in their own countries, like Russia and China, but they don't have one that say you or I could use, Angelo, to reach an international audience. So this is a huge problem. And we talk about weapons and military training, military industrial production, say in regards to the conflict in Ukraine. But if you cannot control information space, you cannot influence it. If the US has total control over it, it almost doesn't matter, because ultimately it comes down to people and whether they're going to work with you or against you. And just having a better idea is not enough because people are so emotional. What do you think about that, Angelo? And then what direction do you think we should go next with the conversation?
I would say one word, which is the essential word, and it's a concept that actually people should really dig into. It's the fundamentals of democracy is a sovereignty. So what is sovereignty? We talk about this quite a lot, and I think this is what we stand for. You and I, we stand for the right of self-determination, meaning what is it? It means Syrians only should be deciding for their fate, so without any foreign interference. That's all we. Even the outcome. Let's say the outcome doesn't please us in terms of ideology. I personally don't care, and I think it's the same for you, right? Let's say if the Taliban was to take over Syria tomorrow, if it's the Syrian people, without absolutely, it's just organic all the way, we have no say into this. So people really need to understand this concept of sovereignty. Sovereignty meaning absolutely no interference. But so you protect your border, physical border, then you should protect your political system, just making sure there's no money flow into your political parties. Media are you media run by you people with no foreign money, and so on. And now you can look at which countries are actually totally sovereign country. Well, you have North Korea, you have Russia, and you have China, but not too many. You have Iran too. And guess what? Those are portrayed as the axis of evil. Why? Because there's a globalist agenda. The globalist agenda is those multinational corporations, globalist elite from the World Economic Forum, because those are supranational. It goes beyond just the country. Very often with people, to simplify, we say the US, we say Europe, but we need to look at above what is above. And the project is ultimately to have a total control by those globalist elites and to destroy nation states. It is about creating a unified market and having completely control over those populations, meaning that your freedom are going to be affected. You will have no say. You have government which is very similar to what you have in the EU. The EU is completely opaque, and you have those politicians in Brussels that actually are dealing directly with the lobbies that are controlled, and who's behind the lobbies are globalist corporation, multinational corporation. But who elected von der Leyen? There's not a single person that actually can tell me who elected von der Leyen. But that project is typically the new world order on a small scale. That's the EU, and they want to apply this to the rest of the world. And they do it slightly, it's a salami slicing strategy. You cannot eat the whole salami at once, but if you slice it bit by bit, you can achieve that. And you see the EU is actually expanding now. It's trying to expand to Georgia, which, by the way, is not even in Europe anymore. So here you are showing actually all those funding. What is interesting is that I personally, I don't know if you saw that, but I personally see a trend that more and more you have those global multinational corporations that actually are starting to bypass completely those intermediaries, which are NGOs. Because you see, those NGOs very often are there in the middle as a support, as organizer, but very often you have actually directly those multinational corporations just bypassing, because ultimately who has the power is those corporation and globalist elites. When I say globalist elites, we are talking about the old families, the Rockefeller that are still existing, but under many different names. You have the banking industry, you have BlackRock, and you have some extremely powerful people that we don't see. Their purpose is destruction of nation states, and they're achieving that. You see, EU is one example, but more and more it is about just destroying nation states. Illegal immigration is one example. You mix up people, and again, I'm not against immigration, but when it's not organic, when it's forced, and most of the population, indigenous population, don't want that. When it's forced, it's creating chaos. If you cannot, in terms of security, it is creating slave labor, human trafficking, and it is actually the ultimate purpose is to destroy identity. Once you destroy identity, you destroy also, the love of the country, which is, some people, they call it nationalism, but it has become something negative to love your country, because the idea is that they want to destroy that. In addition to that, it's a societal project, because you want to make people weaker. How do you do that? You destroy those things that are fundamentals to who we are. Somebody strong loves his country, loves his family, loves his religion, his tradition, and so on. Those people, they are willing to fight in trenches because you have values that are extremely important. Now, if you destroy everything that makes you an individual, including your identity, sexual identity, you don't even know if you're a man or a woman. You've disconnected with your family. I don't belong to this country. Well, you will not fight in trenches. You will turn into zombified slave labor and consumer, because that's how they see you. So ultimately, it's a destruction of the individual. So you see this project, there are different layers, but destruction of nation state is one part.
I would say a lot of that, like immigration, sexuality, gender, a lot of that is just to distract people from
divide.
this,
And to divide too. Absolutely,
yes,
divide.
And to distract them from this list, because if people, when you listen to people like Americans when they were voting and you ask them, what their problem is or who their enemy is, and they're pointing their fingers at each other, at people from Central and South America, and none of them are thinking like this list. These people for generations have destroyed Latin America. That is why people are leaving it, because they can't live there. And they're going to the United States, not because it's a great place, but just because it's better than the wasteland that the U.S. has turned the rest of the continent into. And so this is the problem. This is why we invest so much time trying to get people to see the bigger picture. And it's so important to understand it's not about Republican or Democrat, liberal or conservative. It's about these special interests. They have almost a parasitic perspective. They don't care about investing in their own country. They're just extracting wealth out of it and using it to have more wealth and more power. It's almost like a virus running out of control. Other countries, you will see, they may not be the most enlightened people, or nobody is perfect, but they understand that their country is their country. It's all they have, and they're investing in it. Yes, they're taking wealth and power for themselves, but they also need to make sure that the country sustains itself. So they invest in it. If you look at China, you see them investing in their country, in their people, into infrastructure, and you don't see them making decisions to pursue wealth and power worldwide the same way the West has traditionally. Like all throughout Western history, it has been imperial. It has sought to subjugate and exploit people all around the globe. So this is an important point to keep coming back to. Now, I saw someone in the comment section ask, so what are we saying? Are we saying that Russia and China are doomed? A lot of people are panicking because they saw Syria collapse. I was on Danny Haifeng's channel recently, and I said that if multipolarism was all powerful, there wouldn't be this conflict between the US and the multipolar world. The world would already just be multipolar. This is a struggle between US primacy, dominion over the planet, and multipolarism, a balance of power between nations and the primacy of national sovereignty. That is the struggle that we are in right now. It is a large, I would say, war, almost like a World War III that is taking place just through hybrid warfare and just something just short of all-out war. And I don't know how long that will last. And there will be battles that you win, and there will be battles that you lost. And I would say Syria definitely was a loss. At the same time, Russia is committed to Ukraine. And another thing that I pointed out was that we see Russia and Ukraine. It is obviously outproducing the collective West. It has more resources, more manpower. It is heavily invested in this special military operation in Ukraine. They are succeeding. I had this image just to show people where things are in Kursk. Let me make sure I have the right date here. So this is as of December 1st. And then let's see if I have the other one. Let's see. And this is as of December 14th. So you can see that pocket that they're operating in is shrinking. And Russia isn't even really prioritizing that at the moment. So and if you look at the rest of the front, we see the same story. Russia is advancing. So they had to make a decision about where to apply their resources. We all know that Russia is outproducing the West in Ukraine. The question was, this is a wider global conflict. Does Russia have enough resources to cover all other contingencies? And what Syria told us is no, and that the margins are much narrower than some of us may have realized. How narrow, we don't know. And the collective West is overstretched in certain areas. And so we talk about a war of attrition in Ukraine, but it's also a war of attrition in a way globally. We have to look at that and understand that while we're trying to assess the direction of U.S. primacy versus multipolarism. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Angelo?
No, absolutely. Also, well, just maybe going back to what we were saying before, it's we mentioned those divisions created in the West internally. It's because they don't want the 99% to raise against the 1%. I think it's a class struggle. Ultimately, it is always a class struggle. You see, when what is interesting is that you have this Doge commission, this Doge group, where you have Elon Musk, you have Vivek, and you have Trump. Those are three people that are billionaires, right? So those 3 billionaires are going to work for you so you can have less waste, more savings in reality than not. And people need to be extremely careful. And I do understand that people, they like Elon Musk for, the image he's got. Maybe he's done some good things. It's inspiring, the space adventure, and he's minor. Those are, again, minor evil after Biden and Kamala Harris and so on. I do understand why people would jump straight into Trump's, because he's offering a hope, because people are craving for hope. And I think you and I, we pragmatic. We look at, again, he was given a chance. Okay, he made the wrong choices of his cabinet and so on. But some of the choices he's making, some are good, but some are extremely not good. And I have the impression that he won't have the means to do the things he says he wants to do, because those are policies that it's not under the control of whoever the executive power, because there's a deep state, and this is a machine that is going no matter who's elected. You see in China, we say the government stays always the same. It's always the same party in charge, but the policies changes all the time. In the US, government change all the time, but the policies never change. It's always the same. It's a uniparty. It's just the face. And what they need to give, they need to give the impression to people, voters, that it's extremely divided. Because once it's divided, people actually they take a side, and they're more engaged into going to vote. Because if they really knew, they would not go vote. Why would you be part of this huge fraud? And that's the whole game of dividing people. But they are dividing each other, but they should ally against the 1%, which are actually funding those parties and this whole clown show. It's a clown show. It's nothing else. And I would say whoever is voting is actually part of a big scam. You actually legitimizing a scam. You shouldn't vote. Why vote? It's ridiculous, really.
That's the argument I try to make. As an American, I don't vote, and I tell other people, when you vote, you're just like you said, Angelo, you're legitimizing basically a giant scam, and it's a scam that buys the illusion of legitimacy for the U.S. government. If nobody voted, they wouldn't have a mandate. And then at least everything would be out in the open and honest for all to see. Washington does not represent the American people. It represents Wall Street. And it always has, and it always will. And with Donald Trump, I would go further in saying it's not that he wants to do all of these things and the deep state is going to stop him. He's a politician who told people what they wanted to hear, and he had no intention of ever making good on any of it. He has literally surrounded himself with people who have no intention of doing any of the things he campaigned on. and who on a daily basis contradict all of his campaign promises. And then once he gets into office, just like Biden, just like Obama, just like Bush and Clinton, do you remember Bush Jr. running on a platform of no wars, no intervention overseas? You remember that?
I
People don't
remember
remember
Obama.
that.
I mean, you actually, we were sold on Obama, you and I. I mean, how many actually alternative media, friends of ours, they actually always sold on Obama. Well, it's the same with Trump now. And again, I do understand people that you need to have a hope, really.
Yes.
I mean, otherwise, I mean, if I was American, I would just leave. You don't have any hope. It's always the same. But in reality, it's repeating all the time. And I have the impression, again, I'm not, I'm against violence, but I think those people, when you look at the whole psychology of those people, they're willing to do anything to stay in power. So there's only armed struggle that can reverse things. I mean, civil war, some type of civil war. I don't know, but I have not. You see the rules of the game, the democratic game. There are rules of this game, and whatever game you're playing, whoever writes the rule of the game wins the game. It's very easy. You and I, we can play a game, and let me write the rules of the game. So here, the 1% wrote the rules of the game, and they're winning that game. And if in the case they lose, they actually will find ways just to win, because we saw that in Romania. We see so many, in 2005 in France, French people, they voted against going to the EU in 2005. Most people don't know that. There's a Maastricht referendum. They won. They said, no, we don't want to enter into the EU. And guess what? They went with another treaty and they forced it. Sarkozy forced it upon the people. You see, they have ways. And now there's the lawfare. That's what they're doing. They're reversing laws, the same as they're doing right now in Taiwan. In Taiwan, the president has too much power, and the legislative yuan is actually forcing. They voted a law and it passed of having, oversight. The legislative power having oversight over the executive. Guess what? DPP voted. They elected 4 of the 7 judges of the Constitutional Court. They didn't accept the law to go through. That's the same in the US. Ultimately, you have the Constitutional Court that can actually overturn laws. And it's all about interpretation. Who elected the people at the election, in those courts, are those presidents that actually are controlled by the elites. So it's all rigged. There's no way. Even if you want to play fair, you come up with a third party, they will make it illegal, or they will find ways, and they will, you'll be in jail, or you'll be killed. But they will not let you win. This is why I don't see any. It's either you stop playing that game and you don't vote and just trying to make it up to 80 years old and to have a decent life, or you take up arms. That's what, you take up arms. You want to control your destiny? Are you really brave like Hollywood movies or not? At my age, I wouldn't.
I would, because this is where people are led. They're upset, and then they think, what can we do? And they think about that. But in reality, America is not going to have a civil war. In order to have a civil war, you need to have 2 equal but opposing centers of power with resources. The American people aren't just going to spontaneously rise up against the government. It will never happen. What I think is going to happen, Angelo, and I think this is something that everybody can do right now. We see multipolarism rising. We see the collective West reacting to it. We see all these corporations on that list freaking out, panicking, rushing with their agenda. We remember General Wesley Clark talking about however many nations in however many years. They're way behind schedule. Yes, they toppled Syria, but after how long and at what cost? I would say invest in multipolarism. Stop handing your money over to these people on these lists. It's like PepsiCo. How many people are drinking Pepsi? I think a lot of people who are opposed to U.S. foreign policy are drinking Pepsi, and Pepsi doesn't just give money to Brookings. They give money to all of them. They're behind every single one of them. People that own and chair and direct Pepsi do not care about unhealthy, sugary, fizzy water. It is just a means of extracting wealth from the public, and they take that wealth and they invest it to extract even more wealth and power from the public and to do it overseas. That is what it is. And then we often talk about how this all actually really works. These corporations fund the think tanks. The think tanks produce these papers. The papers are transformed into bills by lawyers, and then lobbyists bring it to Washington to get signed off on, and the corporate media sells it to the American public or the European public or the global public for that matter. So that it's really not about who you vote for in Washington. No matter who it is, they're going to sign off on it. It's the corporations. The source of the problem is the corporations. You need to cut off the corporations. Stop giving them your money. Instead of buying an iPhone, buy Huawei, buy Xiaomi, buy something from the multipolar world. Start creating local alternatives. Start spending your money locally. Give your money to your neighbors is far better than giving it to the Walton family or whoever owns Target or all these other huge corporations. So that is something we can all do. That is actually what multipolarism is. The collective West used to dominate the globe with its industries. Now China, Russia, all these nations in between here in Southeast Asia, here in Thailand, there are huge businesses made by people here that are outcompeting, displacing Western monopolies. So this is the transition that is happening. And if you want something to do, invest in it. And something, say you and I, Angelo, invest our daily time doing. We got involved in the alternative media. We see the control the collective West has over information space. So we are doing our part to try to tilt the balance a little bit better in our favor. Our favor personally, our favor as people, ordinary people who just want to have peace, stability, prosperity, not just for ourselves, but for everyone. To, when I see what is happening in Syria, and Angelo, I bet this applies to you too. You remember the political chaos in Hong Kong that you witnessed firsthand, and I've seen it here in Thailand, US-backed armed violence. And I just think if it got further out of control, it could have ended up like that. Myanmar is pretty much on Syria level in terms of armed conflict. I mean, there's airstrikes. There's basically a war taking place across Myanmar. That could have happened here. It could still happen here. And so that is what we're trying to stand up against. Anywhere the US succeeds, anywhere in the world, makes them stronger and gives them more momentum to do it someplace else. So you might not necessarily care about Syria or Ukraine or Georgia or Thailand or Hong Kong. But eventually, if you keep ignoring it, it's going. The U.S. is defeating the multipolar world in detail. They're knocking out. They're dividing, separating, isolating everyone, and then defeating them in detail until there's nobody left. And eventually, they're going to affect someplace you do care about. So this is why we all have to take a stand, get involved, get invested. I don't think we have to take up arms. I think that's probably what they would want, because that's something they could look at how they control armed violence all across the Middle East. That is exactly what they would do in the U.S. If people started taking up arms, they'd have their agent provocateurs get in the mix. They do it with the protests too. Remember Occupy Wall Street?
Yeah, actually, they call it in reality that what they do is it's what they call a strategy of chaos. I mean, basically, they create the problem and actually come up with the solution. And so, it's what they did with terrorism. How many times they did terrorist acts? We went through this in Italy. In Italy, in the 70s, you had the CIA and the Italian secret services. They were bombing. They did a huge bomb in Bologna station, and it was the CIA that did that, and they gave fault to the communists. Exactly, the Gladio. And yes. So what happens is that this is what we call a strategy of tension. And in reality, it's because they want to kill whatever opposition and to install a police state. So going back to being violent, there are cases that I think people should learn from what happened in Maidan. When you look at Maidan, it was maybe, the those violent elements, maybe small, probably 10,000 people out of a 50 million population. I think the highest was 40 million population in Ukraine. But those 10,000 people, they managed to take over the whole country. You don't need half of the population. You just 10,000. They needed billions of dollars from the US. In reality, they actually declared, Nuland, said, we spent $5 billion on Ukraine.
Yes.
But then 10,000 people, very active, very aggressive. Now, my question would be, Ukrainians, if they knew that 10,000 people could hijack their democracy and they would actually end up killing hundreds of thousands of people and destroying their whole country, I would tell you, this whole silent majority, those people, they would fight for their family and for their country. The problem is that I do understand people not being politicized, because being politicized doesn't make your life better. And you and I, we know that. We don't enjoy necessarily what we do. We do it out of responsibility. But in reality, if you become too passive and you become what I would call what they want us to become, zombified people watching porn, Netflix, on the sofa, drinking beer and junk food, that's what they want us, and get fat. Well, if you become zombified, that's what they want. They want you to be passive. In reality, people, they should actually get some civic consciousness. I'm not talking about getting arms, but getting your civic consciousness, get your information, do your homework. Because if you really believe in democracy, you need to be involved into at least understanding, because they want us to be passive. We just elect them. We do our homework every 5 years, and we think that this is the democratic duty. It's not. Your democratic duty is to actually be involved, and to ask for accountability, and if possible, to have direct democracy. Because direct democracy, then you are involved. They want us to be passive. They say, why don't you vote for us? And then you do your duty. That's not that. People need to do their homework. You want to empower yourself. That's all we're telling people. Empower yourself. Ideology, we do not care. You can vote for the party for the cats. Whatever you want to vote, we don't care. Left, right, that's a distraction. It's about empowering yourself. And if you believe in democracy, go to the foundation. What is democracy? Power to the people. If you have money involved, if you have some elites that actually control the whole game, are you empowered? No, you're not. You're not. You are a democracy of Hollywood. That's but it's not. In reality, you are just enslaved and zombified. And I have no hesitation to tell people to their face, that's what you are. So but at least I don't want them to say that we are in democracy. If they are, and they accept that they are zombified, I'm fine. It's fine with me. But then we need to tell people, really, the facts, state the facts. And then maybe it's about raising consciousness. We're not asking people about ideology. You believe in US imperialism. If you do understand the implication of it, everything, and is it making your life better and so on, then it's fine with me, because that's an opinion. But if it's not based on fact and you don't understand the whole game, then you're a zombie. That's what you are. And maybe if you complain, every day, and you see that your life is getting worse, and maybe your son one day is going to fight a war that you didn't want, but that's what you did. That's your mistake, really, because you lived the life as a zombie.
I think we could probably do a whole show on the type of government in China. Most people have no idea what is going on in China, how China governs itself, the fact that people do vote in China, the reasons why they don't allow the general public to vote for, say, the president. It's a very interesting, very realistic, and obviously effective system of governance. First and foremost, China puts purpose over profit. They understand that a government exists for a purpose. Industry exists for a purpose. Housing exists for a purpose. I even remember President Xi Jinping saying, houses are for people to live in, not for speculating financially, which is a huge problem. The collective West, it's just that its economy is a virus. mindlessly chasing profit, indifferent to purpose, to the point where their arms industry is incapable of producing the weapons they want to go fight their wars to conquer planet Earth. So it really is crazy. I think we could probably do a whole show on that. I think we have in the past, but it's
Absolutely.
not something
We
that
touched a little
we
bit
couldn't
on it,
do
but
again.
I think it's essential, because a lot of people they simplify this. Oh, it's a dictatorship. It's actually far better. It is a democracy. Really, when you look at how representative the Congress, Chinese Congress, you have blue collar. You have actually even a lady that sweep the floor. That's what she does as a job. She's in the Congress. When you look at the Congress and the Senate in the US, they are all millionaires. You have some billionaires actually. The net worth of average congressman, I think it's around $5 million US. It's just crazy. And when you look at actually the difference of wealth from when the time they enter into office and when they left, that is absolutely crazy. And they do not represent you they don't represent you and your interest. So when you look at China, actually the concept of democracy in China is it is not a divide, the mob rule, the 51% that can rule at the expense of the 49%. Actually, it's a whole system of debate, but ultimately you need to come up with a solution for the 100%. That means it's a compromising. Nobody's going to win out of this. There's not going to be a winner, because it's not about a winner. It is about people elected that are going to come up with a solution for the 100%. And there's a check and balance. I mean, basically, they have benchmark. They say, this is what we are going to accomplish for the 5 years. And they cannot do empty promises. See how many times those politicians in the West, they're telling you what you want to hear, but there's no accountability. I will tell you in 10 years we'll go to the moon or we'll go to Mars. If in 10 years we come back, oh, we didn't do it. But it's, people just forget. In China, you don't have a single politician. Actually, what a politician says, a leader says, it becomes law. It becomes a fact. If 5 years later it's not accomplished, it's gone, because it's also a system of not only there's an accountability system, but it's what we call meritocracy, meaning that you raise on the ladder of power only if you deliver. It's about delivering. So they have benchmark. They are noted by their peers, politicians, but also by the public too. There are tens of thousands of surveys every year where they survey people, and so they can anticipate what people need. And the laws are done according to what people want. They do anticipate. In the West, they need to be so upset. They go into the street, they protest, and maybe they are going to do something about it. But it doesn't represent, when you look at the polls, the trust into the Congress and the Senate, it's 30% in the US. You have some data. I mean, South Korean president, he has an approval rating of 11%. 11%. It would never happen in China. You see the polls when it comes to Putin and Xi Jinping, and those are by foreign institutes. I'm talking about Harvard, Harvard and MIT, and for China, and Levada Institute, which is a pro-Western institute, where Putin has 85% of approval. China is even more. There's 95%. But you know why? Because they've been delivering. Putin has completely transformed Russia. Russia under Yeltsin was completely sold off to multinational corporation. It was a complete failure, and everything was, there's a mafia, there was crimes and so on. The index in terms of longevity, child mortality, was at the lowest. All those metrics are high, and there's zero debt. Russia has not been so healthy as now. China the same, 40 years of delivering. That's why they're happy with the system. Now, why would you actually try to export a Western system of democracy, which is for the 1% and for the globalist elites? that is not delivering, that is making people extremely unhappy, why would you want to export it? People don't want it, they're laughing when they see those fights. I just made a video just recently where you have fights in Taiwan. Now in the new politician in Syria fighting each other. In Ukraine, fist fighting and so on. That's a clown show. Where the global south, the rest of the world, BRICS and so on, they look at that and they say, what do you no thanks, but no thanks. That's what they're saying. But ultimately, they're not even criticizing. They say, well, you know what, keep it for you. We are going to find our system. And I believe that every single country, there's not a model that works. When it comes to politics, not a model that works. When it comes to economics, the same. What works in one country doesn't work for another country. So let Chinese to find their own political and economical system. And then ultimately, if it doesn't work, that's their choice. But who am I as the white guy supremacist saying, well, I got it all right? Well, guess what? We could say that maybe the last 30 years, but, we were rich, but, because we pillaged the rest of the world. And we contained the global south. We made sure that they would keep being poor. But guess what? When you look at thousands of years of history, those 200-300 years that you had Western hegemony, that's just a bump. That's an anomaly in world history, because for thousands of years, it was India and China that had the largest economy. So in reality, they have the largest population. Well, the natural flow would say that, it's just natural that they are coming back to their original position. But with the advantage that they don't want to impose their ideology, culture, and everything upon us. That's a big advantage. But we do the West does is projection. They think that the way we are, they will be with us. And the way we are is that, we are going to make sure there's not going to be someone who's going to be bigger than us. Otherwise, we kill them. So we think that'd be the same as us. That's why we are so bad with them, right?
That's literally the U.S. Department of Defense's strategy. You remember, I've got over this New York Times article from 1992. Nothing has changed since then. U.S. strategy plan calls for ensuring no rivals develops. It's absolutely right. I will add one more thing before we go to the questions. Angelo, the reason the US and Europe tried to export Western-style democracy is because Western-style democracy is a system of control. It is not a system of self-determination or governance. It's a system of control, and they export it to other nations because through the National Endowment for Democracy, they can manipulate it and control it. So this is part of that spectrum that I showed, forcing nations to adopt this system, and then the US being able to expertly manipulate it, coerce it, channel it into any direction it wants, so that those people, and convincing those people that Washington's interests are their interests, even if, like Ukraine, for example, those interests involve Ukraine committing collective suicide, national suicide. And that's what we're watching right now. So we have 6 questions. These are from the beginning. The Russian bases. Is it worth Russia to risk trying to keep them? I honestly, we cannot predict what is going to happen. We don't know what may have happened behind the scenes, but this was the final realization of the U.S. regime change operation in Syria. I have no doubt that the goal is to remove those bases. I think Russia understands that, and I think they're looking at alternatives right now. And I'm not really sure how critical to Russian logistics those bases actually are. Angela, have you heard anything about that?
Well, they were important for all the activities. Russia is extremely active in Africa, so they were a platform especially for everything that Russia is doing. So we are talking about now. They're looking we're talking about Tartus. Tartus is probably the most critical. Tartus naval base. They are talking about possible alternative, which would be maybe Libya or Algeria. There are other possibilities, but there would be a setback for Russia. But I would say it is hard to say right now. If they can negotiate something, maybe Maybe if they can get Turkey to support in terms of interfacing with HTS and have a deal, because the deal of those army bases, they were leasing, right? There was a 60 years, something like 60 years leasing. So if they can have maybe a period of time where they can keep on using them, but that's a big question mark right now. I don't think there's no official declaration or statement telling us what's the plan with those bases.
Yes, and I was listening to the Duran right before we went live, and Alexander Makuras referred to HTS as basically a shadow. It's not its own thing. It is a product of U.S. interference in the region. It's going to do whatever the U.S. and others that are arming it, funding it, directing it. There are so many things that HTS is doing that it would not be able to do without this support. I've heard people say, oh, they're going to go into Jerusalem next. No, they're not, because even if they wanted to do that, all of the factors enabling them to do that, all those plugs would be pulled and they would not be able to do that. Now, this is a question. The Gray Zone is a very reliable source. I get a lot. They do a lot of really good investigations there. And yes, absolutely, Al-Jawlani is a wanted terrorist. And I want to share this with people. This is the current U.S. Department of State website designated for foreign terrorist organizations. And if you come down here, you will see, where is it? Hold on. There's a lot of these, a lot of right here. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is a listed terrorist organization. That's the organization he leads.
It's interesting, those list of terrorist organization. They actually keep on putting an organization there and take them out and then put them back. So in the case of ETIM, which is the separatist organization, terrorist organization from Xinjiang, it was in and then they put it out. So in 2014, they took it out from that list. And this is an advanced indicator, meaning that from the moment it's not on that list, you can start actually funding them and you can give them weapons. And that's what happened with Azov Battalion, the same. Azov Battalion was on the terrorist organization, it was on that list and was lifted out. So we need to be, of course, they never change in reality. If you're on that list, you first of all, they'll never put terrorist organization, which is working for the US, in a terrorist list. So probably it started as not being a pawn, maybe at the beginning, or I don't know, but usually that once they take that out of that list, it means that they 100% control it. So that's the case. So now what they're doing is just rebranding. But again, a terrorist that you give a Zelensky shirt is still a terrorist, right?
Absolutely. And I just want to point this one out. Mujahideen al-Khaliq, MEK. If we go back to this 2009 Brookings paper, it's right here. And they talk all about delisting it. It was listed then. They talked all about delisting it so that they could use it to topple the government in Iran. And you can see right here, it was eventually delisted. And this was delisted by people surrounding Trump during his first administration, Giuliani, Bolton. There were a couple of other ones, and they were all involved in lobbying for the MEK when they were still listed terrorists, and they got them off the list, and now they're using them. And so people have to really keep all of this in mind, the game that's played and how it doesn't really matter who you vote into Congress or the White House. Now, was Ukraine involved in Syria? I don't think so. I think they got enough problems of their own. But the networks that support Ukraine were obviously also involved in arming and training these terrorists ahead of the operation that we saw just unfold. So it is a global operation. The U.S. has one playbook. Again, you had the Brookings paper about Iran. You have the Rand Corporation paper about Russia. There are CSIS papers about China. This is the exact same playbook for each one of these countries. So you will see similar elements. It doesn't mean that one went to the other. It means the U.S. is using the same playbook to target all of these countries. Now, Here is another one. America is a Zionist country, so everything they do is about the second return of Jesus and has been since World War I. Now, it is about wealth and power. The U.S., the special interests running the U.S. couldn't care less about Israel. It is like Ukraine or Taiwan or Georgia from 2003 to 2008. It is a proxy. They have invested heavily in it. As Danny Haifang pointed out while during our live stream recently, he talked about how a lot of what the U.S. was doing in the Middle East predates the existence of Israel. So no, it isn't religious, it isn't ideological, it is just the naked pursuit of wealth and power. And they use all of these different proxies. And this is, again, what we're talking about. This is what we're talking about, how people are more activists than analysts, and they will be hyper-focused on Israel and Gaza, and they won't see how the U.S. is doing the exact same thing in Ukraine, in Taiwan, in Myanmar, all around the globe. Again, the exact same thing. They only focus on Israel, so Israel sits at the center of their universe, and they miss the bigger picture. You have to see the bigger picture. Hold on. Here's another one. We'll do this out of order. What is happening in Georgia? In 2003, the U.S. successfully politically captured Georgia. They overthrew the elected government, just like they did in Ukraine in 2014. And then NATO began arming and training the Georgian military. And then by 2008, Georgia attacked Russian peacekeepers. And then Russia launched a retaliation against Georgia. It was a short and very costly war for Georgia. And then eventually, political interests in Georgia, they've kind of wrestled the country out of Washington's control. The Georgia Dream Party does not want to be aligned with Russia or the U.S. They don't want to be a proxy of anyone. They want, like any normal, rational country would, they want to be in the middle and benefit from doing business with both sides. They don't want anyone telling them what to do. And so the U.S. has their opposition groups out in the streets, funded by the NED, trying to overthrow this government and transform Georgia back into a battering ram to use against Russia, because again, right here, tensions in the South Caucasus. Georgia is in the Caucasus region. Angelo?
Yeah, I just want to add, this is a breaking news, and it needs to be confirmed because it was in the chat. Somebody said that Mikhail Kalashvili received the required 200 votes to be elected president of Georgia. So today is supposed to be the day that Salome Zurashvili, sorry for the pronunciation, she's supposed to step down as a president, but she says she doesn't want to step down. So now you have the Legislative Council of Georgia. They meet up and they voted for a new person. That needs to be confirmed. It was in the chat, but if she doesn't step down, that we are going to have some problems in Georgia. But this is an escalation. What Georgia is trying to do is a copy paste of Maidan. In order to escalate in Georgia, the only way they can escalate is to have I would call false flag operation, meaning what happened in Maidan, you had Georgian snipers killing both police and protesters. And basically, there was an escalation because people, with misinformation, people started getting in the street and they say, well, the police is evil. They started demonizing the police and by definition, the government. And that's how they toppled the government. So in Georgia, do not be surprised that you start having some snipers that are going to kill people. And because they need a martyr. This is in the Gene Sharp playbook of color revolution. It's part of the plan, and this is extremely organized. It's a step by step, and it's a process of escalation. So what they need to do is to make it bigger, and sometimes what they do is they start with the EU. The purpose of the EU, because Georgia, they voted for not joining the EU, meaning that they want to still be a sovereign state. Now you have all those NGOs that are going against this law. So they start with this, but ultimately it's about regime change and hijacking and whole democracy and maybe turn Georgia into a new Ukraine.
Yes, and Angelo, this is another one of the contradictions that you were talking about, the utter off the chart hypocrisy. So this is pro-West, pro-NATO, pro-EU president by the way, she was literally in the French government before she became president of Georgia.
No.
Right,
I've studied. No, it's even worse than that. You know, she's an ex-student of Zbigniew Brzezinski. Did you know that? She used to work for NATO. She was a French ambassador in Georgia. She speaks much better French than Georgian, actually. So she was a French citizen, and later on she took Georgian passport. So in reality, she works for the French government. You know, she still works for the Georgian government, and you see, it makes me think about all those ministers in Ukraine. When there was a coup in 2014, overnight you had 5-6 people that overnight they had nothing to do with Ukraine, but they got a Ukrainian passport. They were foreigners, you know, and that's the risk. And this is not the first time in Georgia. They had the experience with Saakashvili, right? Saakashvili, he had an advisor. You know who was the advisor of Saakashvili? It was Glucksmann, this French man, Glucksmann, which is kind of a replica of Bernard-Henri Lévy, you know, the socialist. Now he's in a socialist party, but he's just working for the U.S. empire. And his advisor was a French guy. Now you have this French citizen being president, and she's working for the EU and for Western interests, not for Georgia.
Yes, and this article that I always go to, let me just highlight this one here so I can get back to it. This is from all the way back in 2004 when the U.S. tried the first major attempt to overthrow the Ukrainian government. And they admitted the U.S. was behind those protests. And it was the exact same thing in 2014. But to your point, Angelo, they talk about Saakashvili, how he literally traveled to Belgrade to be trained and directed and prepared by the U.S. They admit that it was the U.S. embassy in Belgrade that was preparing him and others to overthrow the government in Georgia. So this is the reality. A lot of people talk about what Russia is doing in Ukraine. They're acting as if, well, Russia's just as bad. China is just as bad. No, they are reacting to the U.S. literally slow motion, just like Nazi Germany rolling over all of these countries and then into the Soviet Union. It's kind of a reenactment, but through hybrid methods, through regime change instead of outright military invasion. But it's the exact same outcome. You have politically captured this country. You are militarizing it, using its resources and its people to further your geopolitical objectives, which is eventually overthrowing and subjugating Russia, Iran, and China. So this is all really important. I know there's other questions popping up, but we'll end up going all night. Maybe because this question here, can we make this a weekly affair? Well, we at one point, Angela, we pretty much were doing this weekly, but the thing is, since I started doing videos, I've changed the way I've been doing it. And maybe the first year or so that I was doing videos, I also did every interview. Anyone asked me, channel big or small, I would do every single interview. And I was doing interviews almost every day, plus all of my own work. And it's exhausting because this is not a topic that I enjoy researching or talking about. I actually feel sick all the time thinking about it, reading about it, talking about it. It's exhausting mentally. I would rather, I used to work as a chef assistant when I was much younger, and I would work for 12, 18 hours a day. I much rather do that because it's just work. You know, it's not affecting you.
Spend time with your family too, by the way. No,
that's right. I have 2 children. I need to spend time with my family, and so this is why I've just one last thing. I try to minimize the amount of interviews I do per month just to lower stress, focus on just doing the research and getting the work out. And I don't mean any offense to people that ask me to come on. If I say no, I just kind of do it when my energy allows. And again, I was like doing interviews at 3 a.m, 1 a.m, 11 p.m, all weird hours. So there's that. But doing live streams like this is almost kind of like a break because when I do one of my videos, normal videos that I publish, that takes probably a good part of most of the day. And this is an hour and a half, 2 hours, and we get to interact talk to each other, get new ideas. So maybe it is something, if both of us have the time and energy to do, we might do it more often. Angelo, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, absolutely. Same with me. And I would say, again, you're doing an amazing job. To people listening, it is important just to support what Brian is doing. He's not, he's not promoting this enough, I would say, but this channel is not monetized. Most of YouTube channels are monetized. And so it is not easy to make a living out of this. If you were to work for the other side, for the globalists, you'd be making extremely good income. But I would say it's important for people to value the time you're putting and the energy and the cost. It's a personal cost. In your case, I know it is not mentally pleasant. And so if people can support, just I would say by subscribing, by sharing the work, and also if they can give some donation. I think you have an account like Patreon, because I personally do know that that it's not glamour. Maybe we can get millions of views, but it's not. We don't have necessarily fun into that. It's not. People shouldn't idealize, and it's not. Financially, it's not. You don't make much, so it's important to have this support to make alternative media survive, because it's a tough world, and in some cases, we are lucky to live in Asia. We are safe, but we have colleagues that are in danger in Europe, in the US. They are going to go against them. I would say, detention, seizing assets, and so on. And we're not even in a hot war. So I would say people should realize that it's a tough job. So please support Brian's work.
And I also included, I don't know, Angelo, the links that you provided me previously, if they're all good. Well, we'll check it after the show and make sure. In the video description below, all the links to where you can find and follow all of our work is down in the video description below. And if you want to support also, I mean, the other thing is I've been put on multiple lists by the Ukrainian government, by US funded organizations. Back when X was Twitter and Meta was Facebook, they were colluding with each other to delete me. And like back then, my channel was even small. I didn't have a YouTube channel. I was just anonymously writing articles and posting on Twitter and Facebook. And they were colluding with the NGOs here in Thailand that I was exposing, the NED-funded NGOs. And they even put a post publicly talking about that. So you get what support you can from the audience, and it's always under the axe, because at any moment they could decide, they just tell these platforms, all of them are based in the West, and they just say, cut this guy off. And they've done it to other people in the alternative media. So it's stressful, and you have to try to think of what you can do to diversify, because you have a family, you have to take care of your family. So it's stressful. So this is why I would do more. If it was a more pleasant topic, I would have the energy and desire to do a lot more. But anyway, I think we'll stop here. We're past the hour and a half. I want to thank you, Angelo, very much for taking time out of your day to join me. I want to thank everyone who tuned in live, and anyone watching this afterwards. Again, all the information's in the video description below. Angelo and I are very active on X. I am also on Telegram. I post absolutely everything on both. So you can follow me there for daily updates while you're waiting for, I usually do 2 videos a week, usually prepared videos, but in this case, a live stream as well. Maybe we'll do more. We'll see what the reaction is from people. Angelo, any last thoughts?
Just well, thanks for your support. It's always a pleasure, and I would say to everybody, just keep being informed. It's important just to raise consciousness. I think that's the most important. Raise consciousness, so you can empower yourself, and you can get hold of your life. Really, not being to reaction, but being active. Just empower yourself, because ultimately knowledge is power. and they want us to become zombies. They want to control us. It's important to know, at least we take decisions with knowledge.
Absolutely. And again, for people that are absolutely gutted about Syria collapsing, which I think most normal people are, again, it's a battle amid a much wider war that is far from over. So we just have to continue doing everything that we can to move forward. And until next time, again, thank you for tuning in. Bye for now.